And now we've got this star on my left, Tim, who's going to do a little talking about resin casting and a couple other topics, right?
First off, I got these. These are ones that I've already poured. If you guys want to look at them, this is what you, after you've poured them, what I'm starting with. So this one is already finished. What I take is this, I acquired some of this plastic and I just roll it up into a cone, put some duct tape on it to, tape it so it'll keep its form. And then I turn it upside down with, obviously without the paper plate on there yet. And I just fill it with, you can pick and choose if you want, or you can just throw wood in there, whatever. And then once you're done, you take the paper plate, put on top of there, and then I take hot glue and put around the bottom of this. Obviously this one is for a Christmas tree. So what I end up doing is I've got these pill bottles that I end up keeping around in case I have extra. And so this one, there, I'll show you. These are, when I'm making acrylic pens, I cut them to length, and then the last, like this much, I cut into 2 or 3 small pieces. And then these are some blanks that they're made out of silver maple or silver birch. And then they dye it's like a piece of plywood, but real super thin, and they dye them, and you just buy them as a variety pack. You really don't know what colors you're going to get. And I do the same thing with those. And this one is the one that I put the silver birch in. And then this one is the acrylics. You can take those top pieces off of there. That's just to give it some height when I pour it. And then I put the inside in the middle. I just take a piece of wood that I've turned down to like this size, say, shove that down in the middle, because obviously whatever you're turning, you're not going to see anything in the middle. So that's why I use this as a filler, so that you're not, epoxy's expensive. I'm a tight, So I use these, I do the same thing with bowls that I make. I'll cut 2x4s up and cut them like an octagon and set those down in the middle of my mold, and then pour whatever's going to be on the outside, around the outside. And I do the same thing for bowls that I make. And then you guys heard me talk. These are the colors that I brought in. I think I got the kit came with like 24 or 25. This is what that tree's made out of. It's just white, but it's got that little bit of a pearl look to it. This one is grass green. And this one is rose red and blue. And I've used the red, green, blue, and white in multiple things that I've done, so I kind of know what those colors are going to be.
Tim, where do you purchase those?
Amazon. Pretty much everything I get almost is I find on Amazon. Even this epoxy that I use is this one doesn't say it on it, but when I order, yeah, it does. It's a casting resin. So if you're going to do any kind of a bowl or anything that's going to be a little bit deeper of a pour, you want to make sure you get either deep pour epoxy or casting resin. It dries a little bit slower, and I think it just works better with getting rid of the bubbles. Obviously, you still have to put it in a pressure pot, but you have better luck with those than you would, like, you'll see the ones that say tabletop that people put on like a bar top. Those are completely different kind of epoxy, you don't want to use that in something like this because the bubbles won't have time to come out of your epoxy. So if there's no questions about,
That's an A and a B.
yeah, the stuff I buy is a 50-50. It's, yep, one part A, one part B. It's a lot easier than some of these ones that are like a third and 2/3. It's just, for me, it's a lot easier to get the 50-50 mix. I do have these other, as you've seen going around, I make some of these too. These I use for like make trees and snowmen and use them for Christmas ornaments. So again, the only reason I do these is with my leftover epoxy from something like that. So I'm gonna start mixing this stuff. I buy these from Amazon. It's got your different level or your different, it's milliliters. So obviously if you put 100, you want to be, when you finish, you want to be at 200 so your two parts are even. I'm gonna, pardon me?
You clean those beakers with.
These? I throw them away. I mean, sometimes I'll reuse them. Just let it dry on the bottom and kind of look at it and say, okay, I've got, so, you know, when I go the next time, I know that I'm not really what this is. I need to grab a couple pairs of gloves. I'll be right back. Obviously, when you're working with this stuff, you probably would want to put a pair of these on because it's hard to get off.
Tim, you wear safety glasses too?
What's that?
You wear safety glasses too while you're pouring it?
And I wear them because I need them because of the bifocals, but if I could see, I probably wouldn't. The other thing I like to do, this is the resin, this is the hardener. The hardener's a lot thinner than the resin. So I pour this in first, and the only reason I do that is because if you pour this in first and you go to mix it, it's harder to get the resin to come up, you know, when you're stirring it. So I always put the hardener in first and then pour the resin in second. I don't think it really matters as long as you get it stirred up real good. So I got 400 milliliters of the hardener, obviously 400 of this. And I'm just using this. I mean, you can get whatever you want to stir it up. You just need to get something that's heavy enough that it's not going to break when you're doing it. Most epoxy, when you're mixing it like this, they say to stir it for 5 to 7 minutes so that you get a good mix. The other thing you can do is as you pull the stick out and you look on your stick, if you see the resin like separate, obviously you don't have it stirred well enough. And obviously I don't because I haven't even begun to stir it for that long. So because I'm doing a Christmas tree, I'm going to go ahead and use the green color. And it doesn't take much. Kit comes with one of these little spoons, and Usually a couple of those is plenty, but just kind of depends on the, when you stir it, what it looks like and what you want. I think I'm going to want more.
What's your working time with that?
Plenty. It's probably, I'm going to say you probably got at least 20 to 30 minutes. I wouldn't recommend taking that long because you want to try to get it in your pressure pot as soon as you can so that it gives all the bubbles a chance to rise.
Control vacuum in the pot or pressure?
I got a pressure. I mean, I anything I've ever read about these, they make it sound like pressure or vacuum, you're going to get similar results. Some people might say that one is better than the other, but I can't say that because I don't have a vacuum. Daryl's got one. I don't know if
I've seen on YouTube, it says the resin
resin.
does not like vacuum. Yeah, it starts to bubble up and it'll,
Okay.
you want to use pressure. The vacuum is cactus juice and things like that.
Okay, so that's the color that we're going to have. What's that? Yeah, I pre-did this because it would have took too long. And any videos I've ever watched, they say the higher you go with this, the better. That as you're pouring it, some of the thin stream, the bubbles can start to come out already before it even gets in your mold. And obviously you don't want to pour it super fast. You want to give it a chance. I guess the only way you're going to see this is if you came up here, but right now I came up about ½ inch and it's already started to go down, and you can see the bubbles that are coming to the surface without putting it in a pressure pot. So you kind of want to wait until, I don't know, you see it go down to a spot where it stops going down. The bubbles are going to continue to come. I mean, that's going to happen in the pressure pot. Can you see that? So I'm going to put a little bit more in because it's went down now. And the other thing is, if you do something like this, I've got this cone up to, I mean, it's probably about that big around, And I don't fill it with wood all the way up because it's easier to pour your epoxy down in there. And then at the very end, I'll shove some pieces down in there. Once you put this in a pressure pot, I don't care if you got it all the way to the top. You put it in that pressure pot, when you take it out, it's going to be probably that far below the top. And you're going to have to re-pour your second pour. Okay, can you see this now? You see all the bubbles coming out now better?
Quick question. So you're saying you got to deal with the bubbles before you put it in the pressure pot. So I know with concrete you can kind of shake it out and get bubbles out.
Yeah, but
Can you
there's
do the
no.
same with this?
Yeah, you ain't gonna do it with this. The pressure pot's the only way you're gonna get those out of there.
Okay, so that basically resin requires the pressure in order to get the bubbles to come out.
Yep. Now the other thing, as I'm doing this, it's gonna, your wood's gonna want to float. Okay, so at this point, I just push down, put those two pieces of wood in there, and push down on it. See the epoxy coming out the top of it? That's because the wood is floating, and when you push that wood down, it's just like a glass of water. If you put ice in it, it's gonna float up. You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna say that's about as far as I want to go with this. Oh, I gotta cut this.
I was going to say, will it fit?
Again, I poured extra, but more than likely I'm not going to get it right. So now I use these for my extra. Again, these are going to float. So you want to be careful not to overfill it, because as you're filling this, they're going to want to float, and it makes it look like you're at the top. And as soon as you push down on the wood, then you're going to have a big mess. So don't go all the way to the top with this. You're going to have to do 2 pours anyway. And what I do is take duct tape and run my duct tape across the top of it from side to side. And the reason I do that is to keep my wood from floating too much.
Tim, correct me if I'm wrong. When you do the second pour, the epoxy doesn't care. You won't see a sign. You won't see a line.
You shouldn't see. I mean, unless you got bubbles, you might see the bubbles. But if you have a good time for it to come out of solution, I need. You got paper towels? I don't know if you can tell. This, can you? I need to trim this to this. The same way. Yeah, the same as that one. This piece, that's how much that was floating. These pieces were down in there further. I just got to be able to grab the duct tape.
One of our Zoom participants, Joe Duncan, says, and I'm not sure I totally understand this, but he says you can use dry ice in your mold to know how much resin you're going to need. I'm not sure that makes
I've never heard
sense
that
to me.
before, but
Well,
I'm not.
what? Dry rice, not dry ice. Dry rice. Thank you, Tom. Did I read that wrong, Joe? That's what happens. Yeah, dry rice. Okay, now that does make sense to me. Well, when
So-
you get old and your hearing goes and your eyes go.
So I put this on here to push all that wood down so that, you know, it's down. There's a little bit of a void, maybe 3/16 of an inch at the bottom where there's just epoxy. But when you make your, whatever you're gonna make, you're gonna end up probably turning that anyway. I don't think so. I think you're pretty close to the same as what you would be with anything else.
Tim, how thick is your plastic that you use to wrap around? Is it like a 20 mil or?
I don't. It's.
It
I don't
wraps.
know. I don't know
Okay.
what to tell you. I really don't. It's thick enough that it stays that, like, you don't have to worry about it moving on you. You know what I mean? Once you duct tape it, it's gonna keep that shape. I know that.
Question.
Yeah.
The pressure pots, how much are they and how long do you have to leave the pieces in there for they?
The one that I got here, I got from Harbor Freight, and it's actually a what painters use. It's like a painting. I don't know, whatever painters use. Well, all you have to do is there's a few, like you have to buy the valve, the shut-off valve. You have to buy the plugs for the top because the down rod that comes on the lid is what goes down there to suck the paint when you're spray painting. So you take that off and you plug that. There's just a few adjustments. Other than that, it's just, and that thing was, again, I'm tight with my money, so I wait until there's a sale, but I think I got that for just under $100 for that, and then probably $20 in parts, maybe. And that one, if somebody that is wanting to experiment or try it, I just bought a new one that's a 5-gallon instead of that one's a 2.5 gallon. So I'm gonna sell that one. Yeah. What's that? You? Oh, I was gonna say you just bought one the same time I did.
Tim, how much does the resin cost when you, is that a quart in each one?
This one that I just, well, I shouldn't say, I've had, what I've got here was a 3-gallon. It came with 3 of each one of those. That's a half gallon each one of those, so it's a 1-gallon kit. But I bought it as a 3-gallon one. And I'm pretty close. I'd say you're looking at close to $100 for a gallon. I don't think that was quite 300. It was probably 2 something for 3 gallons of it.
I think
not
we bought
cheap.
some at Menards, and it was a gallon and a half for about $150. Tom, do you remember if that was the cost? Well, he's busy back there, so I think it was about $150 for a gallon and a half.
Once it's open, how long, what's the shelf life?
I have
So-
two of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, once it's open, what's the shelf life on the resin and the hardener?
It I'm gonna say, you know, at least 6 months, maybe. As long as you got, I mean, as long as you're not mixing it, it's not gonna harden. You know, I don't know if there is a shelf life. To be honest with you, I've got some that's out in the car that's probably been. It's just I didn't bring it in here because I wanted to make sure I had good resin, and this was brand new.
And I assume this is not like a UV cure, since obviously it's sitting in a dark pot.
No, it's just time. It cures whatever. I want to say that this is like a 40, and I could be guessing, like a 40-minute. But when it says that don't mean in 40 minutes you can take it out of the pressure pot. You leave it in overnight. I take it out, just let it set for a day or so, and then I'll peel off whatever after that.
So what kind of pressure were you looking at?
I do between 40 to 60 psi on mine. It kind of depends on your regulator, what it'll allow you to do, and it depends on your pressure pot of what it says is safe to do. No.
For your pressure pot, the new one that you bought, are you planning on doing about the same PSI, or is it going to be different because of the different volume?
It will probably allow me to do a higher PSI, but I don't know that I need a higher PSI. I think you get much over that and I don't think you're going to
Asking
be
for trouble?
I don't think you're going to be getting a better result, I guess.
So when you say that going a higher PSI might get you a better result, basically this is a case of speed is not the thing you're going for. Go
No.
slow and easy.
Yep. The PSI is what's going to get your bubbles out better. Like if you go with a lower PSI, you're taking a chance that you're not going to push those bubbles out of the epoxy in time. The bottom of this pressure pot the bottom of it is shaped like this. So I cut a piece of 1/4-inch plywood to go down in there so I have a flat surface, so when I set something down there, it's not sitting all cockeyed and stuff. So you can see the bubbles starting to work themselves out already.
Question. Those pill bottles,
Yep.
do you turn the plastic off, or
Yep.
does that just pull right out?
Nope, I just put it right on the lathe. You might want to make sure you're wearing safety glasses. Yeah. Because it does, sometimes it wants to come off in chunks. But when I say that, I'm not, it's safe. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes it does come off pretty good. You don't need to be looking at my ass, huh? And the other thing, with at least with this one, you don't want to tighten down one and then another. You want to snug, go cross, snug it, go to the other side, get it to the same, go back, and keep going back and forth. You see how I move that, doing that? Try not to do that, because you really don't know what's going on inside that pot. All right, so I've got my valve off right now. Put your air hose on, and then I would recommend that you don't stand in front of that gauge when you're doing this, just in case, because that's could possibly. And turn it on real slow. Right now I've got 40. Okay. I have problems sometimes with that one. If you don't tighten it evenly, you'll go to pressurize it, and you start to get to a certain point, and all of a sudden you'll just hear a little hiss. The other thing, pay attention to your gauge, because once it gets to a certain PSI, it's gonna, it might kind of come down, but then it's gonna level out. As long as that stays level, you don't have leaks. If it starts to creep down on you a little bit, you might want to let the air out, loosen those up and tighten the clamps down again so you get an even seal. Because all it is a piece of rubber on the lid that's around that rim that seals down on the can. So,
you might point out that you take the pressure off the hose. You don't leave the hose on in
well,
case it leaks.
at home, sometimes I'll leave the hose on it, and the only reason I do is because if it starts to creep down on you, instead of me trying to grab a hold of that while something's drying inside and taking a chance of me not knowing whether it fell over or not, I'll just leave the hose on it. You shut the valve off, you know what I mean? And then if it creeps down on it, you just grab a hold of it and put a little bit more air in it, shut your valve off, and your hose is still attached. Right now, that gauge hasn't moved, so I'm assuming I got a pretty good seal on it.
How many pounds you got on it?
Probably about 65, maybe. Probably a little more than what I should have on it, but I like to test things to its limits, you know.
How long does it need to stay in the
I leave it overnight.
pot overnight? Okay.
I would say 3-4 hours. The bubbles aren't coming out no more. It's already cured. But I don't mess with it. I just leave. Usually when I do this, I do it during the daytime, and then that next morning, I'll go out, take the lid off, and take my piece out of it. Like that one, I probably won't do anything with the wrap that's on it until a day or two later. I mean, anything that I've taken out in like 12 hours or less, it's like, you felt these that I passed around, they're pretty hard. You could take your fingernail and make a slight impression in that epoxy after 8-10 hours. It's not completely cured. It's cured enough that you can dismantle it and everything. It's not going to do anything to it, but you don't want to turn it. I would recommend you let it dry for another 48 hours before you do anything with it. I don't like wasting that much. That to me is more than what I normally like to waste, but I didn't have anything prepped. I thought 4 bottles were going to be plenty for what I did. It's up to you guys. I was going to turn one of these either a snowman or a Christmas tree, so you can I'm not going to sand it and finish it, but I'm just going to turn it to the shape of whatever. It's up. I don't know how long you guys want to go with this. All right, I'll do whatever I can on it. Is this plugged in? Well, that ain't, yeah, I was going to say, that's 220. There you go. Well, it shows it's on, but it's not. There we go. What's that? Yes, yes, it is.
Tim, are you using a round carbide?
Yes. I've used my regular 1/2-inch round nose on this stuff, and it works fine. I think this you might get just a little smoother finish.
What's the speed that you turn it at?
I've got this one at 2400. With epoxy is going to be a lot like your acrylics, like turning, which I'd never done pens until about 3 months ago. And one of the guys here said something about, man, I need to figure out what I'm, like, the speed or something that I need to be turning this. It's not real smooth. And now Daryl told me, I did not know this, so I would have been just as dumb. But he goes, well, or I said to him, well, what are you turning it at? And he goes, 5. And I said, 500, 5,000? And he goes, 500. And I said, you need to be up about 3,000 when you're turning an acrylic pen. Yeah. No, he said 5. And I was like, I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe 5,000 if you could get it up that high, but if you're turning at 500, you're going to have some serious problems. Just so you know, I mean, a lot of guys probably would just assume this, but so I use my round nose to get my shape, and I'm just coming back over it with a skew to get the finer crease in here. Obviously, this is going to be a snowman. And I've done so many of these. I'm just, like, I don't take measurements or nothing. I just kind of know what I'm looking for and get my spacing. So
Do they have molds available where you can buy a snowman mold like that and just round it out?
I don't know. I would be too tight to buy it when I can do it myself.
Is there a point where it might heat up and melt, or?
Right now, it's not melting, but I don't know. You can tell as I'm cutting this, like where it's cutting right then, it's cutting. And then as you drag it, you can see it's kind of white. And it's cutting it, but it's leaving that little bit of residue that's kind of
Okay.
softer. You know?
I'm just thinking if you had like a dull tool that you pushed into
Oh,
it.
no,
would-
you don't want a dull tool. If you use a dull tool on this stuff, you will ruin it. It's not the tool. You'll ruin this.
So you would
because-
like chip or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's.
I was just trying to figure out how you would tell, because on the wood it just sort of bounces, but on this I wasn't sure if it would heat it up and it just melt or chip or what was going to happen.
Well, it wouldn't chip because of it melting. It would chip because you have a dull tool.
Okay.
Now this head, there's a flat spot right there. Not on this side, so probably need to go a little bit low. But you can see where, once you start sanding these, it's like that. It's like glass. You know what I mean? When you first initially cut it, you're obviously not getting as smooth of a, like you can't see through it. Huh?
What do you final sand it with?
I start with, on these, like 120, 150 maybe. It just, I sometimes I might go a little thicker if I have a spot that I want to get at. You don't want to go too heavy on the epoxy because then you got to worry about getting the scratches back out of it. Now, like with acrylics, I use those little pads when I'm doing my pens, which are like, what grit are those things? Like
1,200 to 12,000.
Yeah, 1,200 grit to 12,000 grit. And you start with 1,200.
About halfway through it.
Yeah. So this, you start with a heavier grit just because there's also wood. You got to remember, you're not just sanding epoxy, you're sanding wood and epoxy. And once I get up into my my smoother, higher grits, sometimes I'll grab a can or a little cup with water, and even though there's wood in it, I'll use some water, just to help, keep the scratches down or whatever. Obviously on that, you can tell if there is scratches on that, they're very, very minute. That one, I think I went to 1,500 grit. Now also, the snowmen that I do, whether they're epoxy or all out of wood, probably 90% of them, I turn the hat separate. Like I'll turn the snowman and then I make little walnut hats. And then when I'm done with this, I make the top of this flat and I glue the walnut hat on top of my snowman. There's some of them that, like I'll glue pieces that are like this. And sometimes I'll go ahead and do the whole thing, make the hat and everything out of the one stock. And then I also make them where I'll take like 3/4, 1 inch, different thicknesses, different types of wood, and I make sure that it's planed, and then I cut circles out of them or octagon shape, and I just glue them. And I go from like say a 3-inch one all the way up to a 1-inch. And I just, you know, for a snowman, it's a little bit different. With the trees, I just go a little bit smaller all the way up. And then that way, when you go to turn it, a lot of your turning is already, you know, done. You don't have to do a whole lot.
Since you've got exposed wood, do you put any kind of finish on it when you're done, or
Yes.
You do?
Yeah, I use on all of my wood and on these too, and so far it's worked pretty good. I use that. We've got it here. I used it a lot, and then I don't know if it was you that went and bought some, or maybe Eldon, but it's Howard's. It's a friction polish. Huh? That might be it. There's 2 different ones that I use that are Howard's. One's the beeswax, the yellowish colored. Yeah, the other one is more of a liquidy, but it's got grit. Like, you can feel the grit in it. And I'll just turn this up to like 1500 and just take a paper towel and just use that, the feed and wax. I think that is what we have some back here. I use that, then I use the beeswax, and then I use like a paste wax. And also I use on the bowls, not so much these, but on my bowls I use that OB Shine juice, where it's a third of denatured alcohol, a third of boiled linseed oil, and a third of denatured did I say? Shellac. Yeah, shellac, denatured alcohol, and boiled linseed oil. And I just mix it in like a ketchup, you buy the empty ketchup bottles or whatever. And I just put that on a rag. That there, if you really wanted to, there's people that use that and that's it. But I'll go through those other ones also after I do that. Yeah, this is the friction polish one. And then this is the second one I use, and then I use a paste wax after that. And sometimes I'll use like on these I won't, but if it's just wood, I use the OB Shine juice first, then this, then paste wax. Because you can finish everything on the lathe. As soon as you cut it off the lathe and you got the only thing that I do, I'm not real good at doing the expanded chuck bottoms. So I turn all of mine with the external, you know, and then it's probably not the safest thing to do, but I've never had one that I didn't do. But I'll take it, and once I'm completely done, I'll the tail stocks down here, I'll loosen up my chuck, and I take that tenon, because I always make my tenons as deep as I can, and then I slide my bowl off of the chuck, and then tighten it back down so I've got like that much. And then I just use the small, like a 1/8-inch parting tool, and I go down until I'm like maybe this much, or until if I see, I always have somebody there that's kind of watching it for me just in case. And if I ever get to the point where the bowl's starting to wobble a little bit, I'll just stop, and then I take a piece of plastic and set up against my bowl, and then use there's a saw out there, and I'll just cut through what's left of that part that I didn't get to, and then I'll take it over on the belt sander and just kind of, I always make my bottoms a little bit convex so they sit good on the outside ring. So then I'll use a drill with the little 2-inch sanding pads and touch up any marks or whatever on the bottom of my bowls. So this is almost done. There's a little bit more right here where there's a flat spot. Yep. So that's pretty much the finished other than sanding it.
If you want to have fun, come on Mondays and Thursdays.
Yeah.
We've had occasions where we had what we call it kind of a throwing contest.
Yeah.
See who can make the shavings go the furthest, or a piece will come off, and see we'll measure the distance.
I've been doing.
We
I had
have fun.
Yeah, I had a shoulder surgery, so I haven't been doing bowls or anything for the last 3 months, and that's when I started doing pens, following his guidance, and
I don't think Eldon has ever felt safer.
yeah, and Eldon has a bigger pile of sawdust now than what I always had the biggest mess under me than anybody. But now Eldon, well, he's been doing it quite a bit too lately. But yeah.
We've been known to turn the barrier so it's between them.
Yeah, I got 30, for 3 months I've been doing pens pretty much nonstop at home and here. And I've got binders that hold 48 pens, and I've got 5 of them full of pens. And the 6th one is like almost 3/4 of the way full. So I've got a lot of pens to sell. Otherwise, my kids, when I'm 10 toes up, they'll be giving gifts away for the rest of their life. So, what's that?
How much do you sell a snowman for?
This one probably for like 45, maybe. So at least I'm getting, like, for what the epoxy cost me. When I make something like this, I'm kind of recuperating some of that I waste. Normally, if I was at home, that would be in another pill bottle that's already ready to go, but I didn't have another one. Didn't think I'd be over 4 of them. So, but like I said, this is all scrap. That one was made out of a mold like the one that we just did, and then I also make trees out of this size too. So I don't have any other kind of molds.
Also, when you're turning acrylics, you talk about going through the different sandings. There's a phrase we use, and it's called popping. You get about, well, if you're using the 7 with the water, you get down to about the 4th one, and all of a sudden it just...
Yeah, you start to see the, I mean, it just
now
starts to be really
looks
shiny.
like crap.
Yeah.
And you get down to about the 4th one, all of a sudden it just glistens, and the color shows up, and it just starts looking really, really neat.
And for any, if there's still some of the guys that are here for the first time, when I first started coming here, I had turned things before, but I didn't know the difference between a bowl gouge and a gouge. And the way I found out was at home when I was using a gouge to do the inside of a bowl, and it caught and it flew off the lathe, hit the wall, hit the ceiling, and landed on my Jeep, which it wasn't a new Jeep, it was an older one. And glued it back together and finished it and ended up selling it. You couldn't tell where the crack was or nothing. It glued together that well. But Teresa in the back is the best instructor for if you want to learn how to turn anything, bowls or anything. When I'm at one of my craft fairs and people that are interested, and I give them one of the cards, and I write her name on the card and say, come in on Mondays and ask for Teresa. I mean, she showed me in like 2 hours how to use a bowl gouge, and I was well on my way to making bowls. And I still go to her quite a bit on certain things of how to, hold it at the right angle, or which, I can't use a bowl gouge. She can take a detail, what are they? A detail, or what's the one you can do everything with? The fingernail cut or whatever it is, but I use a bowl gouge to hollow a bowl, and it's back in my bag. That's all and then I use a round nose and a skew and things like that. She can literally use probably a bowl gouge to turn everything from start to finish. I can't do that. I'm just not as, I'd try like to say I'm not as good as Teresa, but I'm not as good with a bowl gouge as Teresa. Some things I'm good at, some things not so good at. So, but she is by far, at least on the Mondays and Thursdays, she's the one you want to talk to if you want to learn anything.